Kelsey.
I am Shay McGalley.
And I'm David Keener.
And this is the Hourlings podcast project. Tonight, our topic, Shay's driving the bus. Shay, take it away.
All right, you guys. Yep. So I am driving the bus tonight. So I pulled out my glasses so I can look extra smart because something's going to help me. Something must make me sound smarter than myself. These are screen blocking glasses, UV light blocking glasses, which are really cool because they turn everything yellow, and they help protect my eyes from the blue light. So I highly recommend them. But I did not get paid to do that advertisement. So our topic tonight is editors, because I recently had an experience with editing and with hiring a copy editor. And I thought it'd be cool to talk about, what to look for in a good editor, how to choose them. There's a lot of different kinds of editing, so what kind of editing to go with. It's just a really broad and important topic, especially when you're new. You might hear other writers say to you that, one of the most important things you'll ever learn as a writer is how to work with an editor, because almost all of us will encounter that at some point. But you must be a real masochist to hire an editor yourself and have them critique you and redline your work, right? Doesn't that seem like self-defeating? Well, the answer, I think, is absolutely not, because there's a lot of value in having another set of eyes than your own go through your writing and point out areas for improvement, catch those typos, strengthen those sentences. And once you've gone through it a million times with your own eye, I'll tell you what, your eye just jumps right over those typos. And it'll probably make it to print if you don't have a really good fine-tooth comb editor. So I have a book coming out in a couple months, and it is a fantasy book. Right now it's called Overboard, and I'm really excited about it, but it is going to be self-published. I'm a hybrid author. And so I had to encounter the issue of, okay, I'm about to publish this. Do I hire an editor? Who do I hire? What do I need? And I decided at the very least, I would need a copy editor. And so what a copy editor is this is line level editing. So editing the lines, making sure that your structure is right, and sometimes also catching consistency. When I had my book published by St. Martin's Press, I had a great copy editor. And one of the things that she did was she would, for example, compile details about every character in the book and make sure that they all had the same eye color, or their eye color did not change anytime throughout the book. She made sure these consistencies happened. She caught, brands that I would mention, like Nike or Coke or things like that, and made sure that they were spelled correctly and made sure that I didn't look like an idiot when my book was published. And so it's really important. So I said, I want that again for my self-published novel. I tried to hire the same copy editor. She was interested and she wanted to do it, but she was moving away from the industry, so she recommended someone, and I ended up really liking that editor. But before I got to that point, I interviewed about 4 copy editors, and I had them do a sample, and I looked at their work, and I looked to see which one produced the best manuscript, in my opinion.
How big was the sample?
I did. They varied. I had an average of like 5 pages, and then some of them had a little less, and some of them had a little more. And you'd be surprised the range of copy editors, that their prices and maybe skill level even too, I would say. So the cheapest quote I got was about $600 for about 53,000 words. The most expensive quote I got was about $1,300 for the same amount of words. And I'll tell you that I went somewhere in the middle in my purchase. So I have a bunch of questions for you guys. I know that was a long introduction, but it was an important one, I think, to set the stage. So hiring your editor, if you have done it, maybe you haven't, but what's the first thing that you look for when hiring an editor? Start with Marty.
Well, I like to use editors that are familiar with the genres that I write in.
Okay.
First and foremost, I like them to have a body of work that I can actually go out onto the internet and go into Amazon and search their name and find books that they have actually edited. and
Okay.
actually, I don't use samples auditions for editors, but I do go out and read a lot of the works that they have edited to see, and it's amazing how many editors get the veto right away, and that makes it a lot easier.
So a list of like previous works that you can reference.
Right. And because a veto for me is an editor that doesn't want to be listed on your copyright page. It's a huge red flag for me.
That's right.
And
Stand by your work, right?
that's right.
Yeah.
I will never make that mistake again.
Ah,
And so it's vetting them is a very important thing to do.
yes.
And you can you can actually find a lot more editors, but so many of them are already booked, like really solid. So
Yes.
it's you either have to be patient
Mhm.
or keep looking.
Right. Yeah, that's a good answer. I remember you saying that to me years ago, Marty, about having their name printed, and I never forgot it. It was a great suggestion because someone who doesn't want to, be associated with the book after it's done, probably not going to give it their best effort. Dave, what do you think?
Well, if we're talking copy editing, I kind of lucked out in that one of the women in my writing group is a professional copy editor for journals.
Okay.
So she does most of the copy edits for my stories. So she's kind of my go-to person. It turns out she's also very good at kind of the core aspects of a story. So some of the how does the plot fit together and stuff.
Right.
So I also tend to use her for what I'd call minor development editing. When I know a story has a problem, and I go, "Hey Donna," her name is Donna Royston. I say, "Hey Donna, I know this story has a problem. I know I've got too much going on, and something's not right. Can you please tell me what it is?" Um, and usually she'll give me something back like, "You need to cut out a third of your story and rewrite this." And she's almost always right. Or I'll take her advice but do something a little bit differently. So again, I kind of lucked out. I also tend to publish a lot of short fiction. So when that gets published in an anthology or periodical, I tend to get the copyrighted edition of that story and then
Mm.
publish it myself when the rights revert back to me. So I have also leveraged the copywriting that has been done for my stories by other editors, for example. So I've not really been in the situation you were in where I had to go out and kind of interview and hire.
Mm-hmm.
So my first inclination would be to go by the advice of some of my fellow writers and see who they
Interesting.
use for editorial services,
So
rather
like,
than doing the kind of online matchup.
so like a referral from someone you trust.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's
I
very
I
fair.
I, I actually really agree with that premise, but the funny thing is, when I've done that, I have gotten more "don't ever use this editor" comments from authors that I know
Oh,
than
really?
actual hard recommendations.
Huh.
Um, and the funny thing is a couple times I've actually got, "Oh, my editor is great, but I'm not giving you her contact information because she's got projects for me that she's working on."
Ah, yes. People hoarding
Well,
their
Hoarding
editors.
their editors that they like.
Exactly. Yeah, so before I go with more questions for the sake of our listeners, can we do like a little around the room of the different types of editing? Because we've been talking about, I mentioned copy editing is on the line level, looking for consistency, tightness, structure, and grammar. So how about Dave, can you define another type of editing?
so in my day job, the one that pays the bills, um, I do software. I'm an IT person. And in the software realm, we have what we call alpha releases. So there's something that I call an alpha review, where again, it's kind of like what I said. I know my story has a problem, and I give it to somebody who's got the relevant editorial, development editorial experience to find my problem. So I'd call that an alpha review. And then going beyond that, if you were doing like a full novel and doing an in-depth review like that, that would be development editing, which would likely cost you a good bit more than a copy.
Yes, it does. And describe what that is basically for novels.
For novels, a development editor basically critiques the structure of the structure and theme and all the aspects of your story.
Right, plot, characters, everything.
To see how it all fits together, and may give you advice like make the main character a woman instead of a man, or reduce the age of the main character, or all kinds of different things that they think will help you make the story stronger. And just from what I've described, you can probably see that you really want to pick a development editor that matches the type of story that you want to do, or it's not going to be a marriage made in heaven.
Yeah, I mean, I see them as like, the macro level diagnostics of your writing, and they're usually very skilled in storytelling theory. They've really been experts in your genre, and they can pinpoint. When you were saying before, Marty, not Marty, when you were saying before, Dave, about saying, hey, I know something's wrong, but I don't really know what it is. A developmental editor is someone who can find that out. But their changes are going to be pretty big and structural. So it's going to be sometimes it could be small catches, but it'll usually be a long haul if you're starting out with a developmental editor that needs to work on pushing out your story. Marty, what's another type of editing that you can point out?
I would call proofreading an edit pass.
Agreed.
Because I always use a proofreader at the end, because even the best editors I've worked with, they will miss something, and sometimes it's hilarious, the things that they'll miss. And really good proofreaders are really worth it. So
usually they're the last line of defense before you go out into the world. But
that's when you're done.
Yeah.
Then you give it to a proofreader.
Yes.
And they pen the hell out of it, and then you go, oh geez.
Yeah. Are there any other types of editing that we're forgetting? I think those are the big three.
Those are the big three, but then there's things that I would consider to be a little bit closer to the writing process itself. For instance, I'm in a writing group, and I get critiques of each chapter of my story from my fellow writers. I don't really consider that editing per se.
No, not for hire, and definitely not for hire.
Yeah, I think beta readers is a little closer to that, because I use a lot of beta readers. Beta readers are great, and I like to. In fact, whenever I sign a contract with an editor, I am very specific about the cycles that I go through. I convey to them, look, I'm going to make this book the best that I can personally make it. I may have had one or two other people read it to give me feedback, and I make modifications, but I'll give it to you as close to the finish that I like. I want you to do the copy edits for it, and then return it to me. At that point is when I send it out to my beta readers, because I want to have a professional edit on it first. So when they change things and come back to me, and I, with track changes on, will revise based on the feedback I got from the beta readers. Now, some of the beta readers will catch typos or commas. I have one beta reader is a total comma Nazi, and will correct every comma that I have mistaken in there. But with track changes on, when I'm finished again, and I send it to my editor, best and final, and she only has to go through the track changes that I have performed. And I always give them the the last and final word, because if their name is going to appear on the copyright page, I want them to be the last one to touch it. And editors want that too. I've heard horror stories from some of my editors about they give the book back to the author, and then they go in and they change 10% of the book and typos galore. They never get to revise it again, and they end up looking like shit. And editors really want to avoid that. If you want to work with an editor twice, don't do that to them.
That has actually happened to me before, because I do freelance editing as a side gig. And there have been times where, I'll go through and edit the book, and then I see that it's been published, and I go, yay, book was published, and I go to download it or whatever, and I read the first chapter, and the author didn't accept any of my changes, and, it doesn't look so good. And then I have, then I look like I'm a bad editor. So yeah, that I agree. That's a very important point.
I have a different solution for that.
Okay.
I'm also an editor. I do anthologies, and this is the proof of our latest anthology. You'll see that Donna Royston is named, so I actually like her enough that I'm co-editing the volume with her. But second of all, with an anthology, I am paying for the story. And so when I give you edits, I expect them to be taken seriously.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean I expect everyone to be accepted, but it means depending on the level of edit I am expecting to be taken seriously by the prospective authors.
Absolutely. So now that we've sort of defined the big three, I have my next question is kind of like a fun scenario that I want to throw at you guys. So there is a relatively new author who has the budget to hire only one type of editor, either developmental, copy edit, or proofreading. What would you recommend that author spend his money on? One of those, and which one? Or would you tell him don't spend your money on any of them and put it towards something else, like I don't know, either a vacation or a cover or anything else? What do you guys think, Marty?
Copy edit, absolutely.
Get it. Okay.
Copy edit.
Spelling, grammar, and punctuation, straight up. Because you could have the best story in the known universe, but if your spelling, grammar, and punctuation sucks, people are going to give you crappy reviews. It's like stubbing their toes on spelling, grammar, and punctuation. So absolutely, I can't emphasize enough how important it is, especially for new authors, that you actually need to have a really good copy edit. Most people can find personal relationships that will help them do developmental stuff. Writers groups are great for that. Also, proofreaders. Once you get to the stage where you actually have physical proofs, have somebody that you know enjoys that genre and is great at proofreading. And it's amazing how often that they will catch typos. Because like my wife is, oh man, she is so anal about proofreading. It amazes me. So she's always the last eyes on the books before they go out the door. So you can usually find a proofreader because that's much easier than a copy editor. So I recommend a copy editor.
And Dave, you said the same?
I would also go with the copy editor. Now, quite frankly, I have seen some new authors commission somebody to do development editing for them. And the problem is, I think that if you are a brand new author, I don't necessarily think that you have the skills to take advantage of the development editing of a professional at that level.
It's a very smart
I honestly think that you need to do a little bit of stuff in the trenches before you try to go the development editing route. And even then, I think you should be careful. I have literally seen people spend $10,000 on development editing. And it doesn't matter how much editing you have. You can't turn shit into a great novel.
That's right. And another bad thing is that sometimes it'll actually crush the author's voice. And you don't want to homogenize your story. The thing that readers will like is a unique voice and the unique voice of the author. So don't get so much help that it it paves all that over so that your voice isn't felt within the story.
Yeah, I think you have to be able to stand on your own 2 feet as a writer before the development of editing can really work for you. I hate to see somebody spend $10,000, $15,000 and then end up with nothing. I've seen it and it's not pretty.
Yep.
Good points. So since you guys both said copy editing rather than not spending the money, answer this question. Should authors hire or whatever they do to acquire an editor, maybe they're bartering or whatever, but should authors have an editor look at their book before they publish it? Always, sometimes, or never?
Always. No doubt. Always hire a professional editor. Always. It's the 2 things I recommend you spend money on: a professional editor and a really good cover.
Mm-hmm.
Just as a really bad cover, oh, my cousin, he really knows how to draw. A really bad cover is the number one thing that'll make people pass your book, but a really bad editor, people can sense them right in the preview pages. So that's the 2 areas where you really do need to spend money.
Dave, always, sometimes, or never?
Definitely a copy editor. I feel like the
Always?
editing and develop always, and
Okay.
then the development editing I usually get from fellow writers, my writing critique group, or somebody like Donna. A certain amount of barter comes into play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. In fact, a lot of editors, they may be the copy editor, but they'll give you notes. They'll say, hey, this seems like this is a little out of character for blah 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 or whatever. You just need to make it clear that kind of feedback is welcome, and and editors like that because they want the book to be successful too. It's like they've got a vested interest in it because they all want to use them as a reference, really.
Yep.
So if they, most editors that I've worked with will give you suggestions, and they're usually spot on. So, but they're not going to be giant plot, developmental edits that, change everything. But it's always good to take advice from professional editors.
And then my favorite phrase, of course, is always "thank you," and in more detail, "Thank you for helping me make my story better." Just something like that goes a long way with folks knowing that you're actually paying attention and working to make your story better.
Yes,
absolutely. So one theme of this episode is how to choose an editor. So circling back to my opening story about my recent choosing an editor. So I put a posting for the job on a Facebook group that was all editors who all had websites, and it was kind of a feeding frenzy because here's a client and here's like 500 editors, so they all jump when there's a posting. So I did the posting and I explained the book. And I said, for this particular project, if I don't know who you are, or if we don't have a mutual reference connection, I would need to see a sample edit before I would be comfortable hiring you to do the project. And I said, I'm only looking for, a couple pages, maybe between 3 and 5 pages. And I even said, even if I don't pick you, I'd be willing to pay you like, $1.25 a page or whatever, for your time. And you should have seen the pitchforks and the torches that were raised against me for posting that. I was mauled alive by a bunch of editors who said that was, ridiculous. And would I pay a plumber, or would I ask a plumber to come and look at my sink without paying him? All sorts of just absolute ire at me for doing
Well,
that.
you know, the interesting thing about that is
Yeah,
most forums, you post anything and there'll be pitchforks.
true. That is true. I will give you that. But I
And
did, yeah, my question though to you guys, it's coming. was there's a Reddit posting thread that is AITA. Am I the asshole? So I guess I'll ask you guys that. I mean, hey, am I the asshole for saying I need to have a sample before I'm comfortable hiring?
you're not. And the
I don't
thing
think
is
so.
that the anonymity at forums, sitting safely behind your keyboard, you know, the people that didn't want to do that should have just shut up and not applied.
Yeah, just don't apply. Exactly.
Just don't apply. And in this case, clearly they're the assholes. That's
It
it's
comes down to business.
That's
You
the
know,
thing is wherever you go, especially on the internet, there's always assholes.
Oh yeah.
And you just gotta not give a fuck.
Yep.
it also comes down to business. You set the rules of engagement. It's your friggin' money, right?
Yeah.
If you want to part with it, okay, there are some standards perhaps in some of these industries, but you know, you would like to have some assurance that the person's pretty good in the sample. If they don't want to do the sample, fine, you're not going to hire them.
Well,
But
and another thing is if they're like saying, "Oh, you wouldn't do that with a plumber." Every plumber I've ever used, I've asked for references,
That's true.
and I call them, and it's actually, you know, not a good analogy. So
Yeah, and plumbers
it's
are part
also
of usually a big corporation, you know, that has insurance and a complaint forum, you know, that things
it's
don't go
also
well.
it's not a good if my plumber doesn't fix my sink, I'm calling his boss and saying, "Yo, what the hell?
Right, right, right.
I'm not paying the bill until my sink is fixed."
Well,
So
it's a worthy topic for our listeners to encounter on this podcast because if they're interested in hiring an editor, they might experience, you know, the same pushback. But I think all of us have agreed that, you know, it's sometimes it's necessary to like Marty was saying earlier, vet the editor,
yeah,
and a sample edit is a way to do that. It's really part of the practice for many people these days. Dave, what were you saying?
yeah, I also ran across the same situation with cover artists.
Oh, did you?
When I work with a cover artist, one of the things I want to get is I want to get a Photoshop file with layers. Now, I don't want all of the artist's layers. That's proprietary. Their picture may be made of 40 layers. I don't want all of them. You flatten the image and give me the text on separate layers. I'm a happy camper. If you want me to pay a little bit extra for that, I'll do that. But I mentioned what I wanted in a forum, and I got the pitchforks the way you did, and it's like, we don't give out our PSDs. And I'm like, then I won't hire you.
thanks for playing.
Bye.
Thanks for. Yeah, I mean the editors on my post did not really have much legs to stand on because there were I literally got probably 40 applications in 24 hours. In 24 hours, 40 applications. So, oh, anyway.
Yeah, so I would consider that noise. You work with the
Yeah.
people who work the way you want to,
Right.
and screw the rest.
Yeah, so I guess my last thing I wanted to say was, you know, going back to how do you pick it? How do you pick an editor when you have, you know, multiple applications? You know, I narrowed it down and I looked at some websites and, you know, just the way that they presented themselves and the way that they wrote to me. And they all did sample edits. So I actually looked at the sample edits side by side. And I looked down, you know, I split my screen and I saw which things they caught and who had a little heavier hand, who had a lighter hand, who was, you know, like one editor was like a little bit, I wouldn't say too heavy, but they kept on correcting something that I disagreed with. That was just like a placement of, do you put said before or after he, for example. And so, you know, so I was like, oh, I didn't quite feel that. But it came down to two that were really close, really comparable in skill. But I know one of them just had a little more. I noticed that they caught really tiny things. like things that I don't know how they must have X-ray vision, like a missing I in a really long name that is already a
Did you
weird,
see typos in that sample?
I did not. I
I
did
would
not.
have.
Yeah.
I would have put a trap in there.
Oh, you would have put trap. Oh, that's funny. No, I didn't even think about doing that. Like, I thought it was a pretty clean sample. And I was impressed by just the eye that she had. So, it was a hard decision, and I respect them all, and they were all good editors who I would recommend to friends based on their samples. But I had to make a choice, and I had to go with what my budget was able to do versus the quality and whatnot. So anyway, I wanted to close by saying that, and end by asking you if you had any questions about how I made that decision, or if you don't have any questions, what would you say to people who are making the decision currently as we speak?
Well, it's worthy to note
Yeah,
that right now, because of COVID, there are a lot more editors in the market
there are.
because so many more people are trying to join the gig economy and making money at home.
Yep.
So there is a metric ton of forums and places like Reedsy and Fiverr and all
Yeah.
kinds of places like that, and where you can find them, as well as every good editor is going to have their own personal website. You can just go into Google and actually find editors very easily. So enjoy.
Yeah.
Have that search.
And Dave, any questions or any advice?
No, I think you handled it pretty well. I mean, the thing is, you set the rules for engagement, and again, the people that want to work with you the way you want to be worked with, will work with you. And if you don't get anybody, then maybe you have to change something. But I don't think you're doing anything unreasonable.
Cool. Well,
Cool.
we encourage everybody to get those editors and to vet them, to feel confident in them, to set your budget, and to get it through the door, get it to the finish line. That's an important part of it. So thanks for tuning in.
Okay. We'll see y'all next episode.